Welcome back to another episode of Built and Backed. Joining me today is Jesse Williams, the co-founder and COO of Jozu, a DevOps platform for AI agents, applications, and models. Jozu enables organizations to securely manage, optimize, and deploy machine learning models from development to production. With over a decade of experience in marketing and operations for SaaS, cloud, and open source products, Jesse's work reflects a commitment to fostering innovation and scalable growth through open source strategy, product positioning, and startup development. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I would love to start things off by having you share with our listeners more about yourself and what you do at Jozu.
Mhm. Yeah, so I've been in the tech space for gosh, almost 15 years now, which seems crazy because I still feel like I'm in my 20s. So I'm not. But yeah, I got my career started with dev tools, really building one of the first cloud IDEs called CodeMV is built on Docker, and this was way before anyone really knew what Docker was. So kind of the leading edge right there. And then from there, that was acquired by Red Hat. So I did a stint through some of the more established tech companies, had some time at AWS where I led dev tools and some of the open source stuff through COVID. And then I was a VP at Docker actually for about a year before leaving to start Jozu. So that's kind of my journey in tech. Been in the dev tooling space for a long time, a lot of open source community engagement, whether it's with the Eclipse Foundation or now mainly with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
Amazing. I would love to hear or have you share for anyone who isn't familiar with Jozu, for you to share one, what it is, and then two, also what sparked your idea for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jozu, you can really kind of think about Jozu as an enterprise version of something like Hugging Face. So developers have these ML projects. Obviously, it's a hot topic right now, and there's all of these little elements that go into an ML project. You've got the data set, you've got the model itself, you've got the tuning and the hyperparameters, maybe some documentation. All of these kind of tend to live in their own places right now. So we created first our open source project, which is called KitOps, and it takes all of the dependencies that I just named and puts it into one single artifact that's based on an existing standard, the same standard that Docker, Kubernetes, some of these other big name containers that you've heard of are based on. So you don't have to fundamentally shift the tools that you're using or your process because it already works with those existing tools and processes. It
Mhm.
packages it in one thing. We call that a model kit. And then Jozu, which is not open source, so you have to pay for it, is actually where those live. And Jozu gets deployed on-prem. So unlike Hugging Face, where it's kind of you can think of Hugging Face as the GitHub of model development, we're
Mhm.
more like the GitLab. So we're private. We're on premise, very security focused, and then we add a lot of really cool functionality to Jozu Hub, like the ability to package inference microservices, which is a big pain for developers, something that's pretty difficult. We also do security scanning, versioning, and governance, as well as provenance, and all those little things that are expected in, like you could almost think of a tool.
Oh, amazing. And so I'm assuming that like through your career, that's what kind of led you to come across like the need for Jozu, but would love to hear more about like how the idea actually came about.
Yeah. So Jozu, let's call it Jozu V1, was actually an incubation project out of AliCorp, which is Kevin Ryan, one of the founders of MongoDB, his venture capital firm, and they incubate ideas that their team has.
Hmm.
Uh, Originally, we were actually an API analytics tool, and we had some ML aspects that go in and looks at usage and would kind of surface. Some insights about that usage. And as we were building that, we found it extremely difficult to deploy that ML at any scale into production. Now,
Mm.
being from the DevOps and developer tooling space, my team and my co-founders, we worked together a lot. We were at Red Hat together. Brad, who's now the CEO, we were actually CodeMV, then Red Hat, then AWS. So we've all gone together to different
Yeah.
We kind of started scratching our heads and we're like, this is like needlessly difficult. Um, and the reason being is that prior to, 2022 and AI really kind of started getting traction, these projects would be built inside of more of like a scientific space that's way more educational and research oriented, and now they're getting deployed into production for everything.
Mhm.
And there's this very big difference between the tools that the data scientists would use to build these models and the tools that your everyday application engineer needs to deploy these models at scale. And so that's where it came from. And we went back to our board and we were like, hey, you funded us to build this first tool, but we actually think there's a bigger opportunity with this other tool. And you can kind of think about it as like we're going to start selling the shovels instead of going after the gold, right? If you
Mhm.
kind of use that California gold rush analogy, and so that's what led to KitOps.
And I think that's really interesting that you had shared that you originally started with something different. And then as you're going through, you're like, you know what? This is way harder than it should be. Let's switch gears. And so I would like to dive deeper into that because I feel like that's something a lot of founders face is like going through building something, and then they're like, wait a second, I think we need to just do a 180 and switch gears entirely. So
Mhm.
what was that process like for you of just changing gears and coming up with something different?
You know, it was a difficult decision to make
Mhm.
with the founding team. We didn't take it lightly, but it was one of those things where we felt really confident that everyone was starting to face that same problem. And whenever I've built companies in the past, you kind of want to find a wave and have that wave be the momentum. It's a lot harder to sit there and try and make your own wave. And so
Yeah.
when you see something like AI taking off and it becoming the number one initiative at every Fortune 500 company in the world, you you know, you'd be remiss to not want to go after that. And so there's kind of two ways you could address it. We were trying to take AI and overlap it into an existing solution and great TAM there, a lot of API usage. Obviously, it's a big technology.
Mhm.
Um, but then we saw, maybe a bigger opportunity that was right in front of us. We have the expertise to go and capture it. And kind of the cool thing about KitOps is that uh, before we had the aha moment of let's go and sell this, we had actually built it for us. So we had kind of already built the solution. And
Yeah.
so those three things came together in a really great way.
Yeah, and you made a good point there about like you saw this big opportunity, so it'd almost be, I don't want to say like a mistake, but definitely a missed opportunity to not follow through on what you were seeing and what you felt like would be the better choice.
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so with that, did you face pushback from any investors or your board or anyone? And if so, like how did you navigate that and be able to do it successfully?
Yeah. Our board has been extremely supportive, and so have our investors.
Mhm.
The biggest thing that was the challenge was helping people understand it. So remember, AI/ML it's very, very new and it's very technical. And so there's only so many people that really understand the opportunity and where the market is going. On top of that, Gorkum, my CTO and co-founder, is a bit of a mad scientist genius. And so he'll like say something and you can just kind of see the whole room is like, yeah, you left me a long time. And so helping people to kind of understand that it's also one of the superpowers that we have is when you work with someone who's just so ahead of the curve here and kind of understanding like, hey, here's what developers are going to face and they can kind of predict that, you can end up with a really cool product, which is kind of the sweet spot that we've landed in.
Oh, absolutely. Like being able to build something that you know people are going to need, not just like you assuming that you know what they're going to need. So like you said, being able to find that problem and build a solution for it is what has led you onto that traction for success.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like you have more than one co-founder. So I'm curious to hear what your like co-founder team is like. I know you mentioned that you all have worked together throughout all these different companies in time and whatnot, but I'd love to hear how having co-founders has really helped to support you throughout this time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I've got an excellent co-founding team. We've all worked together. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do if you are gonna put together a co-founding team is um, find people who you've worked with in the past and you've done it successfully. So Brad and I, we were, part of the founding team of CodeMB, also open source. And so we've been through kind of the pressure testing of the startup space together. And we know that, when things get really rough, that's when usually the best version of everyone comes out. I'm joking. But you learn that you can navigate those situations together and that you're complementary to each other. Um, so that's kind of you know one of the big things. With Gorkum, we met him when Codembi was acquired into Red Hat. He was one of the senior engineers there, and eventually, I can't remember if he was a distinguished engineer when we got there, if he got promoted to that. But really, really influential in the developer tooling space. Really influential in the Java space. And so he was one of those people that when we met him, he kind of completed the trio of like the hyper technical person. You've got me, who's kind of more the GTM operations minded. And then Brad, he's kind of the perfect like CEO executive kind of mindset where he thinks, a little further ahead and a little higher level than I do as far as the tactical implementation of some of these things.
Yeah, definitely. And I would love to hear one, I guess, like where you see yourself going in the next year or so and any exciting things you might be working on with Jozu that you're able to share.
Mhm. Yeah, so where we're going, we've started off very small. Like I said, we started off with a hub. And actually, even before that, we started with an open source project, and so we've kind of been trying to uh, tackle this space one bite at a time, just kind of taking small steps and moving quickly but intentionally. Because if you look at some of the things that are happening in the AI space, you know, it's moving so quickly that there are trends that come, and if you just kind of jump onto that trend, uh, that trend could be gone just as quickly as it shows up. We've seen that happen a lot. The other thing is, right now there's a lot of talk and a little action. And
Mhm.
so every enterprise, like as I mentioned earlier, they're talking about AI, but when push comes to shove, are they actually building it? Uh,
Yeah.
and then there was recently a study that came out. I can't remember if it was from MIT, but 95% of AI projects never make it into production.
Oh, wow.
And that's a huge amount. And there's different
Yeah.
reasons for that. But ultimately what we're seeing right now is that, we kind of have to stick with that conviction of like, hey, the market is going to get to a place where these are getting deployed into production. And more so that it's not just going to be ChatGPT, it's going to be these open source models. Um, And so we're gonna just kind of keep building slowly, building the tools that we know developers are gonna need because they've needed it with all of whether it was the kind of more monolithic applications and then into microservices, now into these, AI applications. We know they're gonna have to have certain things. We know they're gonna need security, and so we're building that in. We know they're gonna need governance. We know they're gonna need the ability to deploy with confidence, and that's really the direction um, that we're building for.
Yeah, and I love what you mentioned there about like tackling it one bite at a time and not jumping on every single trend that pops up. Because I think just having that intentionality can do so much for you in the long run compared to like what might be a typical founder mindset, which is like, I think it's Mark Zuckerberg's idea of like move quickly, break things, and just keep going. But I like your approach and mindset of like just take it step by step and have a reason for why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be clear, we do try and move fast, and breaking things is inevitable. Luckily, we're so small, there's not a lot of things to break at this point. It's kind of just let's test the waters and see if something's there. And um, we've had a few features that we released. Early on, we released uh, KitOps dev mode, which is like an ability to kind of have a user interface for your model testing. And no one really adopted it, but when we released it, we were like, oh, this is going to be great. And then we have other things that we've released that all of a sudden overnight you're like, oh, sweet, we've got, 10,000 new users. And it's really about just kind of continuing to, finger to the wind, is there something
Mhm.
there? Is there not? Okay, let's build in that direction. If there's not, okay, let's stop building there and let's find something else.
Totally. And to that point that you shared about like building out a feature that you think is going to be really resonating with people, but it doesn't, like how do you move forward from that? Because I think it can be difficult to, I don't want to say feel like offended, but being like, oh my gosh, I thought this was so great and no one's biting at it. Like how do you take that next step without getting discouraged? I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Um, you definitely can't be emotionally tied to your feature launches or
Yeah.
anything like that. That's for sure. That if there's one thing I've learned through the years is some things hit and some things don't.
Hmm.
Really, for us, as far as moving on goes, we're in constant iteration. Whether it's the way that we say things, we're always testing things. The way we say things, the way that we sell the platform. I think we're on like going back and forth right now with our designer on our third iteration of homepage because every time we have a conversation with, you know, someone who's an ideal customer,
Hmm.
um, you gain new insights about their needs and their desires. And I think that's one of the big things, just taking those data points and um, syndicating them into some sort of an action every time you get them and realizing that there's a lot of opinions out there.
Hmm.
Um, some of them are good, some of them are not as good, and you kind of have to figure out which ones those are.
Totally. And I love what you mentioned about like just testing things and like going through different messaging and designs and seeing what will really resonate with people. Because I think that's like an easy trap to fall into is just like working in your startup and not always working on it. But that is important for being able to take a step back and have that bird's eye view of like what exactly do we need to change about this in order to ensure that we're providing the solution that our customers, users, clients, whatever are looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit of like you kind of scrape layers away at it. And
Hmm.
um what I've found with KitOps and Jozu in particular is that the first ones that bit, especially in a really innovative space, and when I say bit, like engaged with us to have a conversation, we're typically kind of smaller organizations.
Hmm.
And the needs and the pain points that a small organization has are very different than a large organization.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a little bit of like we kind of tuned our way up to larger organizations. So these small ones, like, hey, they have this problem, and then we kind of marketed that problem, and you find someone who's, instead of 100 employees or 1,000 employees, and they say, hey, this is a problem, but really we've got this other problem. You're like,
Yeah,
okay, and then you market that, and then the 1,000 person company turns into a 10,000 person company, and then you kind of find yourself to like, oh, now we understand the needs of a 100,000 person company, which usually is also, you know, relevant to smaller companies as well.
totally. And do you have a process of that you follow of like knowing whether or not you should jump on those needs that you see arising? I'm sure that like if you see like the same request over and over again, that might be an indication that you might want to build a feature for that or build it out. But I'm curious to hear how you like kind of hold the reins in to not jump on every single thing that might come across.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we do because we're in the
Hmm.
developer space. You can there's there's this principle in the developer space that you might not be familiar with. It's like shift left and shift right. So shift left means that you're taking things that would typically be outside of the scope of the developer and you're putting it into developer tooling so that they can deal with it earlier on in the development process. And then shift right are like, how do we remove some of these things from the developers? Typically because you want to standardize it across an organization. So there should be like one person that um, puts this guidance into place. So governance is a great example. You can only deploy software with this type of license into production. You shouldn't have individual developers determining that. Like it should be determined for them. And then there's like a gateway that stops, non-compliant software from going into production. Um, there's always, when you talk to the developer audience, they're always going to push for more shift left. Like they want more and more control. And so that's one of those things where when we go through these process, we're talking with people, we'll hear things that could pivot our roadmap, but like I said, you have to have that conviction of where we're building, right?
Mhm.
And that's what guides the yes or no for us to go and really explore an idea, or to say that's a great idea. And maybe when we get to a place where we have 100 software developers and we can splinter 5 of them off and say, hey, go build this thing because we've got a small cohort of people that think it would be really cool.
Mhm.
We'll explore, and then for now it's like, hey, we've got limited dev resources, we got limited budget, we've got limited runway. Let's keep building where our conviction is, and everything else we kind of have to say no to.
Yeah, and that is a good reminder too, that just because something is a no now doesn't mean it's always going to be a no. Like as circumstances change and resources open up, like it could be a yes down the line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to hear more about what the investor journey has been like for you as you've been going to raise funding and work with different VCs and how that has really benefited Jozu's journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we've ended up with a really, really great group of investors.
Mhm.
This isn't the first time that I've done VC before, and I've had some hard lessons in the past where when you take money just because someone has it. Um, we looked at our investors as more strategic. We wanted to work with them because they had a specific competency that we thought would benefit us, maybe fill in some of the areas where we have weaknesses.
Mhm.
Uh, and so we had a pretty slim criteria there. Now, you know, with that being said, we started fundraising in a really difficult time to raise funding. Um, the climate in VC during the elections, which is when we closed our round in January of 25. And so we went through, we started fundraising in early 24, right at the peak of when the elections in the US were happening, and everyone was a little bit on edge on which administration, because the administrations had very different uh, views on AI. And so
Mhm.
being in the AI space, it's like, well, is it a good place to invest right now? Is it not a good place to invest? It was hard to find VCs that were gonna take the leap in, unless, your name was Sam Altman, who was able to score just incredible amounts of venture capital. Um, and so I don't know, I think Brad was telling me that he had a large portion of these VC conversations. I had only a handful,
Mhm.
but we talked to around 80 VCs. Um,
Wow.
all of us gave us very similar, you know, kind of the similar spiel of like, hey, we think this is a really great idea. We're just not sure, you know, where we're going to be investing, in the
Mhm.
immediate term. And then as we kind of refined and worked our way through to more VCs that were uh, like kind of specialists in the AI ML space, that's when we started getting some term sheets,
Mhm.
which was really good. And we had some backing, we're open source. So the Mozilla Foundation came on and they thought it was a great idea, which um, was just a good signal for us. And so they were interested, and Half Court, which is who led the round, they really focus on AI ML, and they were interested. They had actually been looking for a portfolio company like ours to invest into and bring on. And so when those two put a term sheet in front of us, everyone else kind of felt a little bit more confident. But like I said, it's highly technical,
Mhm.
and unless you really know what it is, it's hard to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that you shared that story because I think it really highlights you and your co-founder's resiliency. I mean, it sounds like from when you went to try to start raising to when you finally closed and finished, it sounds like it was almost a year. So I think like being able to continue through with that is really, really important. And I think that's one of the hardest things about being a founder is that just having that dedication to keep going when things are hard and aren't working out. But as you've seen since then, I mean, it clearly has worked out in your favor to just keep moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. And it was really helpful. I don't want to say it was all us. We had the team that helped incubate Jozu, the original V1. They were incredible advisors to us through the process of raising. Obviously, they're on the cap table, so they have an interest there.
Hmm.
But they did give us a lot of feedback. When we would talk to a VC, we'd run it past them, and they'd kind of give us some feedback, like, you should be concerned about this or like ask about this. That really, aligned with our vision of having investors and board members that were partnered with us and really care about the vision that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've already shared really good tips and advice here about what you've learned along the way. But what is the biggest thing that you feel like you've really learned or the lesson that stuck with you the most throughout being a founder?
Um, I think probably the biggest lesson that I've learned so far is that um, there's a healthy amount of urgency that needs to continuously be injected into the organization. And as a founder, that's your job.
Hmm.
It's easy to kind of get into the grind and then things start slowing down. Especially when you know, you go for a funding round and you get 2, 3, 4 years of runway. It's easy to kind of burn that first 3 years, and then you get to that last year and you're like, oh no, like we're 40%
Yeah.
behind the numbers that we put out. And as a founding team, I think it's important for you to kind of keep that pace of work moving. I'm constantly thinking like, okay, how many months do we have? Can
Hmm.
we get there? Are we on track? Do we need to move faster right now? Are we hitting the performance that we thought we were? What can we do to get there? What can we do to 10x it in a, best case scenario? Where are the areas that are dragging behind and why, and can I fix them? And so I
Hmm.
think it's injecting that urgency back into and just reminding people like, hey, like we're not a profitable company. We haven't arrived. Like we've still got to prove ourselves. Uh,
Yeah.
though even though we have great things happening, which don't get me wrong, we've had some amazing things like with the CNCF getting accepted and leading the model pack spec. It's easy to be like, oh, we arrived. I'm just gonna,
Hmm.
slow down a little bit and kind of enjoy some time. And I think that's really probably pretty dangerous. So,
Yeah, I love that. It's like not, I mean, it reminds me of like my quote in the back, but like getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and like making sure to keep moving. And when things get really great, not just taking that as a sign to just coast, but keep moving forward. And so I'm curious to hear like how you do that. Because I think that's such a good point here about like constantly pushing your team to wanting to keep moving forward and being urgent with what you're building. But how do you keep that momentum going? And especially having that inspiration kind of passed down to your team as well.
yeah. So I'm a big fan of leading by example.
Hmm.
And so for me, I always ask myself at the end of the week, I'm like, did I do something that moved the business ahead? And if
Hmm.
I can't answer that, then I didn't do it. And sometimes I'll ask myself this daily, as I'm looking at my to-do list, like, okay, of all of these things that I have, what things do I need to do to actually move the business forward? Because
Hmm.
there's a lot of things you could do. None of them bad per se, like they probably need to be done. But things that actually provide business value and move the business forward, there's pretty few of those. And so prioritizing those things, we're small enough that we can do a daily stand-up. And so I
Hmm.
make sure that when I get into stand-up, I talk about the things that I've done to move the business forward. And it just kind of drives that urgency with other people. When I get there, I'm like, oh well, like I had a a call with a person and I did this, I did that. And it's kind of like, oh, like you kind of mailed it in this morning. Like that sends a signal to people.
Yeah.
But when you get on, you're like, hey, I knocked out this, and this all before lunchtime. Here's the impact that it had. Uh, it sets the team culture of like, hey, we need to show up and we need to show that we've done something that's impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Jesse, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is for them to give a shout out to anyone who's doing something cool in tech right now, whether it's another founder, ecosystem builder, VC, whoever it might be. And I'm curious to hear who you would like to give a shout out to.
Yep. I will give a shout out to Ben Cotton. So Ben is someone who worked with me, worked for my team on open source at Docker. He came in to build the open source office. He's recently left, but he publishes a bunch of content on LinkedIn that I really appreciate. Does a lot for open source communities. As a founder in open source, I think it helps to stay connected to the needs of the community, and so I really appreciate the content that he publishes. I appreciate the work that he does. And so, yeah, love to give him a shout out.
Awesome. That's a good one. Jesse, this has been such a good episode, and I really enjoyed having you on the show to talk about everything that you've built at Jozu. And now I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online because they'd like to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me. I think my weird URL thing is just Jesse Williams, Jesse Williams with a one on the end. I don't know where the one came from. And then every once in a while I'm active on X as well, but I really just repost our community stuff. My handle is friends call me JW. And then you can find me at jesse-williams.com if you're interested in reading, some of my build in public type blog posts.
Amazing. And I'll link to all those places as well as Jozu's links in the show notes so that way our listeners can easily find you all from there. But thank you so much again for coming on this week's show.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashley.